When American pilots first encountered the Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate in the closing stages of World War II, they realized almost instantly that this was not another fragile Zero. The Gale, as its name translated, was a completely different predator, sleek, powerful, and armed to the teeth. At first glance, Allied intelligence officers were stunned. This wasn't the outdated, paper-thin design they had grown used to facing. Instead, the Hayate looked more like an equal to America's late-war fighters, and that discovery rattled nerves from the Philippines to Okinawa. Captured reports from the Pacific described the first sightings of the Hayate as unnerving. American crews, used to overwhelming Japanese aircraft with speed and armor, suddenly found themselves in duels where the enemy could match them in almost every respect. Its clean lines and larger frame signaled a level of performance Japan had rarely achieved. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, American airmen whispered that a Japanese fighter might rival their best machines. And before I continue deeper into this story, if you love these cinematic deep dives into aviation history, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. There are countless hidden stories about legendary aircraft waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss a single one. What made the Hayate's first impression so powerful was timing. By late 1944, America had grown used to dominance in the sky. The Mustang, the Hellcat, and the Corsair ruled the Pacific and Europe alike. The sudden appearance of a Japanese fighter that could challenge them felt almost like a cruel twist, an echo of Japan's early war supremacy rising again. Yet initial encounters told only part of the story. To American eyes, the Ki-84 seemed like a miracle weapon arriving too late, a fighter that carried the potential to restore Japan's fading power. But as U.S. analysts soon discovered, first impressions, while striking, were only the beginning of the Hayate's complex truth. Beneath the skin of the Ki-84 lay the true reason American analysts began to worry. This was no longer a lightly built Zero, relying solely on agility and sacrifice of armor. The Hayate was powered by the Nakajima Hay-45 Homar engine, a 1,800 horsepower radial that, when working at peak efficiency, could push the fighter past 390 miles per hour, dangerously close to the performance envelope of the P-51 Mustang. American engineers who examined captured models admitted that, on paper, the Hayate had the raw power to compete with the very best Allied aircraft. But speed was only the beginning. For the first time in a Japanese design, durability had been prioritized. The Ki-84 carried armor plating to protect the pilot and self-sealing fuel tanks, features American pilots had long exploited Japanese planes for lacking. Suddenly, the usual tactic of diving in, firing, and watching Japanese machines erupt in flames no longer applied. American gunners noted grimly that the Hayate could absorb punishment and stay in the fight, a trait that placed it in the same league as American-built warhorses. Armament added yet another layer of danger. Standard versions of the Ki-84 carried two 20mm cannons and two 12.7mm machine guns, enough firepower to shred bombers or fighters alike. Later versions mounted heavier 30mm cannons capable of smashing through the armor of B-29 superfortresses. For America, this was alarming. The Pacific strategy relied on massed bomber formations, and here was a fighter with the tools to tear them apart. Still, American engineers spotted flaws. The Homar engine, while powerful, was notoriously unreliable due to rushed production and poor wartime materials. Reports revealed that many Hayates never reached their full potential simply because engines broke down or lacked proper maintenance. In pristine condition, the aircraft was a terrifying equal. But in practice, scarcity of parts and declining Japanese industry often clipped its wings before it even reached the skies. To American intelligence, the Ki-84 was a paradox. A fighter with all the makings of a late-war superweapon, yet crippled by the very shortages and strains that defined Japan's crumbling war effort. When the Ki-84 finally appeared in combat, American pilots quickly realized this was not another Zero or Oscar they could dismiss. The first clashes came in late 1944, as Hayates began intercepting B-29 formations over the Japanese home islands. U.S. bomber crews, who had grown accustomed to lighter Japanese fighters falling in flames, now reported something different. An enemy that pressed the attack, took hits, and kept coming. In debriefings, gunners described their disbelief at seeing Ki-84s with chunks of wing missing or riddled fuselages still charging through defensive fire, their cannons blazing toward the bombers. Fighter pilots, too, felt the shift. Mustang and Thunderbolt squadrons sent to escort the B-29s encountered Hayates at high altitude, where the aircraft's Homar engine gave it a sudden burst of competitiveness. Veterans noted that the Ki-84 could match climbs and turns that once had been the Allies' domain. Dogfights became harder, bloodier, and far less predictable. One Mustang pilot admitted, "If the Japanese had more of these earlier, the air war would have been very different." Yet combat also revealed the aircraft's flaws. American pilots learned that many Hayates suffered from poorly manufactured engines, leading to sudden failures mid-flight. Others lacked proper maintenance, their performance uneven and unreliable. Pilots who faced well-tuned Ki-84s respected the danger, but many also observed opponents forced to break off simply because their machines faltered. This inconsistency became a silent ally for American forces. Still, in the hands of skilled Japanese aviators, the Hayate could be deadly. Accounts from late war battles show B-29s shredded by 30mm cannon fire and escort fighters pushed to their limits. It was not uncommon for squadrons to return with losses that might have been unthinkable against earlier Japanese aircraft. The Hayate forced American pilots to treat every engagement with seriousness. It could never be underestimated. By 1945, the skies over Japan had become a deadly chessboard. The Ki-84 did not dominate the air war, but it clawed back something Japan had been steadily losing: respect. For the first time in years, American flyers admitted they were facing an opponent that could truly fight back. For the Americans in the Pacific, psychology was as much a weapon as firepower. By late 1944, U.S. pilots had grown accustomed to overwhelming superiority. Japanese aircraft, once formidable, had fallen behind in speed, durability, and armament. Victory seemed assured. Then came the Ki-84 Hayate, and suddenly, confidence was shaken. Reports circulated through bomber squadrons of this new Japanese machine that could withstand defensive fire and strike with brutal force. Tales spread of B-29s limping home with engines destroyed by 30mm shells, their gunners swearing that the attackers absorbed more punishment than any Zero had ever managed. The fear was not simply of destruction, but of unpredictability. Airmen no longer knew what to expect when enemy fighters approached. For fighter pilots, the psychological shift was even sharper. Many entered combat expecting to dominate with their Mustangs and Thunderbolts, only to find the Hayate able to meet them maneuver for maneuver. Some likened it to dueling a reflection, a foe that matched their moves, their speed, even their aggression. The aura of easy supremacy evaporated, replaced with a respect laced with unease. Strategists, too, took note. Intelligence assessments warned that if Japan could produce the Ki-84 in numbers, the balance of air power might tilt dangerously. The thought of massed Hayates defending the homeland filled American planners with grim concern. Though logistics and shortages prevented this nightmare from materializing, the possibility alone cast a shadow. And yet, another layer of psychology worked in America's favor. Pilots who engaged Hayates knew they were fighting not only machines, but also a crumbling empire. The inconsistency of Japanese production, the shortage of fuel, and the inexperience of many late-war pilots meant the Hayate's potential was rarely fully realized. For Americans, this bred a strange duality: fear of what the aircraft could have been, and relief that Japan could never fully unleash it. The Ki-84 did not change the outcome of the war, but it left an indelible mark on the American psyche. It was proof that Japan could still create a weapon worthy of respect, even as the tide of history flowed relentlessly against it. When the dust of war settled, the Ki-84 Hayate entered the history books as one of Japan's last great fighters, an aircraft that came too late, in too few numbers, to change the course of the conflict. For American aviators who faced it, however, the memory lingered. Unlike earlier Japanese machines, which could be dismissed as fragile or outdated, the Hayate commanded genuine respect. It was proof that Japan had the capability to engineer a machine equal to the best the Allies had to offer. Captured examples after the war confirmed what pilots had suspected in battle. Test flights conducted by U.S. forces revealed a fighter that, when properly maintained, could match or even outpace many late-war American types. Engineers praised its combination of speed, firepower, and ruggedness, a blend rarely seen in Japanese designs. The Hayate stood as the embodiment of what Japan might have achieved if resources and time had been on its side. Yet its legacy was not one of triumph, but of irony. The very qualities that made the Ki-84 formidable were undermined by the realities of a collapsing war machine. Poor fuel quality, shoddy production standards, and a dwindling pool of trained pilots ensured that the aircraft never realized its full potential. For America, this duality made the Hayate both a frightening adversary and a reassuring reminder that Japan's industrial base could no longer sustain the fight. In the decades that followed, aviation historians continued to debate the Hayate's place in the pantheon of World War II fighters. Some labeled it Japan's finest creation of the war, a machine that could stand alongside the Mustang, Spitfire, and Thunderbolt. Others viewed it as a symbol of lost opportunity, a testament to what happens when brilliant engineering collides with national exhaustion. For those American pilots who had seen it in the skies, however, the verdict was simple. The Ki-84 was a fighter worthy of respect, a last defiant gesture from an enemy unwilling to bow quietly. Its roar over the Pacific was brief, but in that briefness lay a reminder. Even in defeat, Japan's aviation genius could still send shivers through the hearts of its foes.